Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
My name is Bella Martinez, though for 3 years I forgot that name meant anything beyond Kyle's girlfriend. 3 years of walking on eggshells, of measuring my words like ingredients in a recipe that could explode if I got the proportions wrong. 3 years of wearing long sleeves in summer and concealer thick enough to hide continents. Kyle wasn't always a monster. That's what made it so damn insidious. He started as Prince Charming Flowers every Friday, surprise weekend getaways, the kind of attention that made my friends jealous. "You're so lucky," they'd say, and I believed them. I believed him when he said I was special, that he'd never met anyone like me. The first time he hit me, he cried harder than I did. Promised it would never happen again. Bought me a diamond bracelet that felt more like shackles than jewelry. But promises are just words dressed up in pretty ribbons, and Kyle's words were as reliable as paper umbrellas in a hurricane. By year 2, the apologies got shorter. By year 3, they stopped altogether. I became a ghost, haunting my own life, speaking only when spoken to, existing only in the spaces Kyle allowed me to occupy. I worked at a small accounting firm downtown, ironic, really, considering how poorly I'd learned to calculate my own worth. The J Lounge, set tucked between a pawn shop and a Chinese restaurant on the wrong side of downtown. The kind of place that attracted people running from something. The neon sign flickered like a broken promise, but inside, the darkness felt safe, protective even. I started going there on Thursday nights when Kyle worked late. Just me, a corner booth, and enough whiskey to dull the edges of everything sharp. In my life, the bartender Mickey, a gruff man with kind eyes, never asked questions when I nursed the same drink for 3 hours. He understood that some people come to bars not to get drunk, but to disappear. That particular Thursday in October, the air crisp with the promise of winter, something was different. There was a small stage I'd never noticed before, bathed in amber light. A woman stood there adjusting a microphone, her wild curls catching the glow like copper wire. Her name was Samantha Cole, though I wouldn't learn that until later. What I learned immediately was that she had a voice like aged bourbon smooth going down, but with a burn that lingered. She wore confidence like other women wear perfume, and when she looked out at the sparse crowd, her eyes held secrets I wanted to decode. She started with Nina Simone's Feeling Good, but the way she sang it made it sound like a prayer, like a battle cry, like a promise that things could be different if you were brave enough to reach for different. I felt something crack open inside me, something that had been sealed shut for so long I'd forgotten it existed. Hope. Dangerous, intoxicating hope. "You gonna stare all night, or are you gonna tell me your name, sweetheart?" Her voice cut through my thoughts like silk through skin. She'd appeared at my table while I was lost in the music, and up close, she was even more devastating. Green eyes that seemed to see straight through all my carefully constructed walls. "Bella," I managed, my voice rusty from disuse. "Bella," she repeated, like she was tasting my name. Pretty name for a pretty woman who looks like she's carrying the weight of the world. Before I could respond, before I could retreat back into my shell, Kyle's voice sliced through the moment like a blade. "Bella, we're leaving." The temperature in the bar dropped 10 degrees. Kyle stood in the doorway, his presence sucking all the oxygen from the room. His eyes locked onto Samantha with the kind of hatred usually reserved for mortal enemies. "Now," he added, and that single word carried 3 years of conditioning. I stood automatically, muscle memory overriding desire. Samantha's eyes flicked between us, reading the subtext written in my trembling hands and downcast eyes. She didn't say anything, but I felt her gaze follow us out into the night. In the car, Kyle's silence was worse than screaming. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Who was she?" he finally asked when we reached a red light. "Nobody," I lied. "Just a singer." The slap came so fast, I didn't see it coming. My cheek burned, and tears sprang to my eyes, not from the pain, but from the familiar shame of being reduced to nothing in public. "Don't lie to me," he said conversationally, as if he hadn't just struck me. "I saw how you were looking at her." I spent that night on the bathroom floor, pressing ice to my face and wondering what it would feel like to disappear completely, but I went back. Thursday after Thursday, I went back to the Jade Lounge like a moth to flame, knowing I'd probably get burned, but unable to stay away. Samantha performed every week, and each time I felt a little more of myself returning. She never approached my table again, but I caught her looking. Subtle glances during slow songs, a raised eyebrow when I applauded a little too enthusiastically. It was a game of inches, of stolen moments and unspoken understanding. The night everything changed just started like all the others. Kyle working late, me in my corner booth, Samantha on stage pouring her soul into a microphone. But when her set ended, instead of disappearing backstage, she walked straight to my table. "Buy a girl a drink?" she asked, sliding into the booth. Beside me. "I shouldn't," I said, but I was already signaling Mickey for another round. "Story of my life," she laughed. "All the best things are things we shouldn't do." We talked until last call really talked, not the careful conversational tiptoeing I'd grown used to. She told me about growing up in New Orleans, about learning to sing in her grandmother's church, about coming to the city with nothing but a guitar and dangerous amounts of optimism. "What about you?" she asked as Mickey announced closing time. "What's your story, Bella Martinez?" The use of my full name startled me. I'd gotten so used to being just Bella or Kyle's girl that hearing my complete identity felt revolutionary. "I don't have a story," I said. "Not really." "Bullshit," she said, but gently. "Everyone has a story. Some people just forget they're the author." It happened in the storage room behind the bar. Mickey had asked Samantha to help him move some cases, and somehow I found myself following, drawn by some gravitational pull I couldn't resist. The room smelled like beer and possibility. Cardboard boxes stacked like building blocks, dim light filtering through a grimy window. Samantha was reaching for something on a high shelf, and the movement made her shirt right up, exposing a strip of skin that looked like caramel in the yellow light. "Can you hand me that?" she started to say, turning around, and then we were inches apart, breathing the same air, existing in the same impossible moment. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was both of us, drawn together by some magnetic force stronger than logic or fear. Her lips were soft and tasted like gin and rebellion, like everything I'd been denying myself for years. The kiss lasted forever and not nearly long enough. When we broke apart, I was shaking not from fear, but from the sheer overwhelming sensation of feeling alive. "Bella," she whispered, her forehead pressed against mine. "You deserve so much more than whatever's making you so afraid." That's when I started crying. Not the careful, silent tears I'd perfected over 3 years, but raw, ugly sobs that came from somewhere deep and wounded. Samantha held me until the storm passed, her hands gentle in my hair, whispering words I couldn't quite hear but felt. In my bones, lying to Kyle became an art form. Creative fiction designed to hide the most important truth of my life, that for 2 hours every Thursday, I remembered who I used to be. I told him about working late, about a new client requiring evening meetings. I crafted elaborate stories about traffic jams and overtime, memorizing details in case he questioned me. The deception felt like swallowing glass, but the alternative, giving up my Thursday nights, was unthinkable. Samantha and I developed our own language of stolen moments. A brush of fingers when she handed me a drink. Text messages deleted as soon as they were read. Conversations that skirted the edge of everything we couldn't say but both understood. "Leave him," she said one night as we walked to our cars. It was the first time either of us had acknowledged what Kyle was, the first time the truth had been spoken aloud. "It's not that simple," I replied, though the words tasted like ash. "It could be," she said. "Pack a bag, walk out the door, don't look back. People do it every day." But I wasn't people. I was Bella Martinez, professional victim, PhD in fear. Management. The idea of leaving Kyle felt as impossible as growing wings and flying away. Kyle found out the way abusers always do through the scent of hope on their victim's skin. I thought I'd been careful, but apparently freedom has a smell, and Kyle's nose was trained to detect it. "You've been different," he said one night, circling me like a predator. "Happier." "Why are you happier, Bella?" "I'm not," I lied, but we both knew it was bullshit. I had been happier. For the first time in years, I'd been looking forward to something, and it showed. He went through my phone that night while I pretended to sleep. Found the deleted text messages that weren't quite deleted enough. Saw Samantha's name in my call log. I heard him Googling her, the soft click of keys in the darkness. "Jazz singer," he muttered to himself, "Jade Lounge." My blood turned too. Ice. I lay perfectly still, controlling my breathing, praying to whatever gods protect foolish women that he wouldn't put the pieces together. But Kyle wasn't stupid. Cruel, yes. Controlling, absolutely. But never stupid. The next morning, he made coffee and eggs like nothing had happened, kissed my forehead before leaving for work, told me he loved me. It was the kind of normalcy that felt like the calm before a hurricane. I called in sick to work and spent the day pacing our apartment, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I wanted to warn Samantha, but I didn't know what to warn her about. Kyle's threats were usually subtle psychological warfare rather than outright violence against others. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at her that first night, the hatred in his eyes, and I realized I'd been underestimating the danger. That Thursday, I almost didn't go to the Jade Lounge. Almost stayed home, almost played it safe, almost chose survival over life. But Samantha was expecting me, and the thought of her wondering where I was, of her thinking I'd abandoned our Thursday nights, was worse than whatever Kyle might do. I arrived early before her set and told Mickey to make my usual double. Dutch courage, my grandmother would have called it. I needed all the courage I could get. Samantha's performance that night was electric. She sang like a woman possessed, her voice carrying emotions I couldn't name but felt in my chest. Songs about freedom, about breaking chains, about women who refuse to be caged. I wondered if she was singing to me, or for me, or maybe for both of us. After her set, she joined me as always, but something was different. There was a tension in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. "You okay?" she asked, studying my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," I said, and started to tell her about Kyle's discovery, about the danger we were both in. But before I could get the words out, the front door of the Jade Lounge exploded inward. Kyle stood silhouetted in the doorway like an avenging angel, his eyes scanning the room until they found us. The few other patrons looked up from their drinks, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Mickey's hand moved toward the baseball bat he kept under the register, but Kyle only had eyes for Samantha. "So you're the whore who's been fucking my girlfriend?" he said, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent bar. What happened next occurred in slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously. Kyle crossed the room in 3 strides, moving with the purposeful grace of a man who'd planned this moment. Samantha stood to face him, no fear in her eyes, only a kind of sad understanding. "Kyle, don't," I said, but my voice was small, childlike. the voice of a woman who'd learned that her words carried no weight. He grabbed Samantha by the throat, his fingers wrapping around her neck like a necklace of violence. Her eyes went wide, not with fear, but with surprise that someone could be so casual with cruelty. "You think you can steal what's mine?" He hissed, his face inches from hers. "You think some dyke musician can take my property?" That word property hit me like a physical blow. 3 years of being owned, of being reduced to an object, crystallized. In that single syllable, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, undiluted rage. The broken guitar was behind the bar, a Gibson with a snapped neck that Mickey kept meaning to throw away. My hand found it without conscious thought, fingers wrapping around the neck like I was born to hold it. Time slowed. I saw Samantha's face starting to turn red, saw Kyle's knuckles white with pressure, saw Mickey reaching for his phone to call 911. But I also saw something else. I saw the end of being afraid. The guitar made a sound like thunder when it connected with Kyle's skull. A deep, reverberating crack that seemed to echo in my bones. He dropped Samantha immediately, stumbling backward, blood trickling from his scalp. "Not anymore," I said, and my voice was steady for the first time in 3 years. Kyle turned to look at me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my heart sing. Fear. He was afraid of me. "You fucking bitch," he started to say, lunging toward me, but Mickey was already there with his baseball bat, and Samantha was on her feet, and suddenly Kyle was outnumbered by people who wouldn't let him hurt me anymore. The police came. Statements were given. Kyle was arrested for assault, and I pressed charges for the first time in 3 years. The bruises on my arms and the history documented in hospital records told a story that even Kyle's liar couldn't spin. Samantha held my hand through all of it, the interviews, the paperwork, the moment when Kyle was led away in handcuffs, still screaming threats and obscenities. Her fingers were warm and steady, anchoring me to a reality where I was no longer alone. What happens now? I asked Mickey as we watched the police cars drive away. "Now you live," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. But living, I discovered, was harder than surviving. Survival was about enduring, about making yourself small enough to slip through cracks. Living required space, required courage, required believing you deserve good things. The first week was the hardest. Kyle made bail, and though there was a restraining order, paper wasn't much protection against 3 years of conditioning. I jumped at every sound, expected him around every corner, woke up in cold sweats from dreams where I was still trapped. Samantha stayed with me those first few nights, sleeping on my couch, making me tea when the nightmares came. She didn't try to fix me or rush my healing. She just existed in my space, solid and real, proof that I wasn't alone anymore. Recovery wasn't linear. Some days I felt strong, invincible, ready to conquer the world. Other days I couldn't get out of bed, convinced that Kyle would find a way to make me pay for my rebellion. But Samantha was patient. She introduced me to her world, other musicians, artists, people who lived outside conventional boundaries. They accepted me without question, this woman who flinched at sudden movements but was learning to laugh again. I started therapy, Dr. Helena Rodriguez was a small woman with fierce eyes who specialized in domestic violence recovery. She taught me words for things I'd never been able to name: gaslighting, trauma bonding, learned helplessness. She helped me understand that I wasn't weak for staying. I was strong for leaving. Trauma doesn't make you broken, she told me during one session. It makes you a survivor. And survivors are some of the strongest people I know. Kyle's trial was scheduled for spring. His lawyer kept pushing for delays, hoping I'd lose my nerve or change my mind. But every Thursday at the Jade Lounge, listening to Samantha sing, I remembered who I was becoming. Not who I used to be, that woman was gone, transformed by fire into someone harder and more beautiful. Samantha taught me to play guitar during those winter months. My fingers were clumsy at first, unused to creating rather than hiding, but she was patient. We started with simple chords, building towards songs that meant something. Music is healing, she told me as we sat in her apartment, guitars across our laps like bridges between worlds. It takes all the pain and transforms it into something beautiful. I learned to play Blackbird by the Beatles, the song about broken wings learning to fly. My voice was rusty from years of silence, but Samantha helped me find it again, encouraged me to sing even when the notes came out cracked and tentative. There was something magical about making music with her. In those moments, sitting on her couch with sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt truly free for the first time in my adult life. We weren't just two women playing guitars. We were two souls creating something larger than ourselves. Spring came early that year, and with it, Kyle's trial. I wore a blue dress, the color of sky, of freedom, of things that couldn't be caged. Samantha sat in the front row behind me, her presence a steady reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. Testifying was brutal. Kyle's lawyer tried to paint me as an unfaithful girlfriend who'd fabricated abuse to cover her adultery. He suggested that I'd attacked Kyle in a jealous rage, that I was the real aggressor, but the evidence was overwhelming. Hospital records, police reports, photographs of bruises that told the story of 3 years in hell. Other women came forward to Kyle's ex-girlfriend from college, a coworker he dated briefly. A pattern emerged that even his expensive lawyer couldn't obscure. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned with a guilty verdict, I felt something inside me uncurl, some tightly wound spring finally releasing its tension. Kyle was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 5 years of probation. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. As they led him away, Kyle turned to look at me one last time. But instead of the fear I'd always felt under his gaze, I felt nothing. He was just a man now, not a monster. Small, empathetic, and powerless to hurt me anymore. Summer brought changes. I quit the accounting firm and took a job at a nonprofit that helped domestic violence survivors. It felt like coming full circle, using my experience to help other women find their way out of the darkness. Samantha and I grew closer, our relationship deepening from crisis, bonding into something real and lasting. She never pushed, never demanded more than I was ready to give, but her love was constant as gravity. We talked about the future sometimes, plans that extended beyond just surviving into actually thriving. Travel, maybe. Music, definitely. Children, possibly, when I felt ready to trust myself with something so precious. You know what I love most about you? Samantha said one evening as we watched the sunset from her fire escape. What? I asked, genuinely curious. I was still learning to see myself through eyes that weren't clouded by Kyle's poison. You're becoming who you were always meant to be, she said. Under all that fear and pain, you were always this strong, this beautiful, this brave. You just forgot for a while. 6 months after the trial, Mickey asked if I wanted to perform at the Jade Lounge. The idea terrified me standing on that small stage, vulnerable and visible, everything Kyle had tried to keep hidden brought into the light. But Samantha convinced me to try. We'd been practicing a duet, a haunting ballad about rising from ashes, and she thought we were ready to share it. The night of our performance, the bar was packed. Word had spread somehow, the woman who'd fought back, the survivor who'd become a singer. People came to witness my transformation from victim to victor. Standing on that stage, guitar in hand, looking out at faces filled with hope and curiosity and support, I felt the final pieces of my old life fall away. This was who I was now, Bella Martinez, survivor, musician, woman who refused to be caged. Samantha and I sang about darkness and light, about breaking free, about the courage it takes to choose love over fear. My voice was stronger than I'd expected, carrying clear and true through the amber-lit room. In the crowd, I saw Mickey beaming like a proud father, Dr. Rodriguez, who'd driven over from her office after her last appointment, women from the shelter, where I now worked, living proof that escape was possible. But mostly I saw Samantha beside me, her voice blending with mine, creating harmonies that spoke of partnership and possibility. We were writing a new song together, one note at a time. A year later, we left the city, not running this time, but choosing. Samantha had been offered a recording contract in Nashville, and I'd been accepted into a master's program in social work. We loaded everything we owned into her beat-up Honda and drove west, toward music and mountains and a future we'd write together. Kyle was released on parole after 18 months. I heard about it through the victim notification system, but the news didn't send me spiraling like it once would have. He was a chapter in my story now, not the author of it. We settled in a small town outside Nashville where nobody knew our history. I was just Bella, the social work student who played guitar on weekends. Samantha was just Sam, the singer with the golden voice and the kind heart. Our past wasn't erased, but it wasn't our entire definition anymore. Sometimes late at night, I think about the woman I used to be, the one who made herself small, who apologized for taking up space, who believed that love was supposed to hurt. I feel sorry for her sometimes, but I'm also proud of her. She survived. She endured. She made it possible for me to exist. People ask me how I found the courage to fight back that night at the Jade Lounge. They want a simple answer, a moment of revelation, a Hollywood-worthy transformation scene, but courage isn't a lightning bolt. It's not a switch you flip from afraid to brave. Courage is what happens when you've been terrified for so long that terror becomes normal. And then someone reminds you that normal doesn't have to mean acceptable. Samantha didn't save me. Mickey didn't save me. The broken Gibson guitar didn't save me. I saved myself, one Thursday night at a time, one small choice after another. They just made it possible for me to remember that saving myself was an option. The truth is, we're all capable of more than we think. We're all stronger than our worst circumstances, braver than our deepest fears. Sometimes we just need someone to sing us back to ourselves. Today, as I write this story, Samantha is in the next room working on a new song. Something about second chances and the music we make when we stop being afraid. I can hear her humming, working out melodies that will probably become our next duet. My hands are steady as I type, unmarked by bruises, free to move across keys that spell out words of my own choosing. There's a wedding ring on my finger now, not a chain, but a choice. Not ownership, but partnership. In 6 months, we're expecting our first child, a daughter, if the ultrasound is right. I think about her sometimes, this little girl who will never know a world where her mother was afraid. She grew up hearing music, seeing love that lifts rather than diminishes, learning that her voice matters from the very first cry. I've kept the broken guitar. It sits in the corner of our music room now, repaired but still showing the scars of that night. Sometimes I play it, and the sound is different from when it was perfect, richer somehow, more complex. Like voices that have learned to sing through pain. That's my story. Not the fairy tale version where the prince saves the princess, but the real version where the princess saves herself, where love doesn't conquer all, but it gives you reasons to keep fighting, where happy endings aren't guaranteed, but they're possible if you're brave enough to write them. 6 steel strings and a second chance. That's all it took to remember that my life was worth fighting for. And if you're reading this, wondering if you have that kind of courage hidden somewhere inside you, let me tell you something, you do. It might be sleeping, buried under years of being told you're not worth saving, but it's there. Sometimes you just need the right song to wake it up.